This video looks at setting up an Adobe Premiere project for you to start and edit. Now, before you start the Premiere project, it's important that you know your camera and you know what kind of footage you've shot. Now, some of the different types of video that can be shot could include older DV footage, which is a standard definition, smaller frame size. Then you have your HDV, which is almost HD, but it looks HD, but it actually uses fewer pixels, and it's a very common shooting format on both tape-based and card-based cameras. Then you have the AVC HD, which is very common on the new Canon 60Ds, and most DSLR cameras will use this AVC HD. Now, you can go up from here to your DVC Pro, your RAW, your XD Cam, but they're more professional oriented camera formats, so you generally won't encounter them unless you're working in the industry. Now, the other thing that you need to be aware of is whether or not your footage was interlaced or progressively scanned. Now, these are very technical terms, but they refer to different ways that the image is recorded onto the camera, onto the chip, and they are used interchangeably, so it's just important that you know which one you've shot your footage in, and you can generally tell by a little I or P in your menu when you're using your camera. Now, again, some of the details on these are listed in the PowerPoint presentation that's on Blackboard, and you can see some of the different specs here. Now, HD can, such as with your AVC HD, can be at a full frame size of 1920 by 1080, or it could be shot at a slightly smaller 1280 by 720. So again, it can be a little bit daunting when you start off, but if you have a camera of your own, then it's very straightforward to just learn the settings that the camera shoots in. If you're borrowing cameras or if you're swapping cameras, then you just need to be mindful that you check that all of the different cameras that you're using are shooting in the same mode. Some of the frame sizes here are visualized. You've got your old SD, your 720, and your 1080, and then you go up to the more high-end cinema sizes, which are measured in K for thousands of pixels. Okay, so the first step when you're working with Premiere is to launch the application, and when you launch the application, you're going to be given the options to open a project that you've previously worked in or to create a new project. So we're going to assume that no work has been done here as of yet. So we're going to open a new project. Now, you're going to be asked to set up your project in a certain way. These two tabs, the General and Scratch Disk tabs, are what Premiere needs to know about how you intend to get the footage from the camera, from the SD card or tape onto the system, and where you want to store all of the various files that Premiere needs and to run, and some of the files that it actually generates itself in the middle of your editing. So in the general setting, you can leave the video rendering and playback as it is. Your video display as timecode. That is the common way of working with video, so we're not working with film. Audio, again, display format, we can work in audio samples or milliseconds. Going to leave that at audio samples. Now, the capture is referring to the process of getting footage off a tape-based camera. So when you capture, you're playing back from your camera and you're doing what's called a capture or ingest, getting the footage onto your hard drive so that you can work with it on your computer. Now, if you are working with tape-based medium, you are working in either HDV or DV. So again, just know your camera. If you're working on tape and you've shot in HDV, set that to HDV. Now, this particular workflow I'm going to show you is not working from tape, it's working from an SD card, so I can leave that set, but it's not going to have any impact on my edit. The next tab over here refers to scratch disks. Now, captured video, again, that's asking me when I capture the footage or ingest it from a tape, where do I put it? Okay, now there is a kind of rule of thumb with video. Where you're working with an edit in Premiere or something like that, then you're going to want to store your media in a particular place. Now, the media here is the video that we're taking from the camera, from the SD card or tape, and that should be stored on an external hard drive. Okay. Now, what you should do is you should save all of your video footage that you're going to bring into your edit on an external drive, separate to your main hard drive on your computer, because you want to run and save your project file, which is the Premiere project file, onto the fastest drive, which is your local hard drive. Okay, just hide that. So captured video, if I were working from tape, I would set that to somewhere on my external drive, which I can see here. Captured audio, the same. Now, with video previews refer to a type of file that Premiere generates as you're editing on the timeline. And these video previews are required for you to be able to see what you're doing. So video and audio previews allow you to work with video on the timeline, change things, colors, the order of clips, and then give yourself back a preview that you can look at so that you know what you've done. Now, I'm going to set these up now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto my hard drive, and I've created a folder called Scratch Disk. Now, Scratch Disk is a kind of a generic top-level folder that I'm going to use to store all of my my media that's going to be in various video editing projects. I have a project that I'm going to use for this video demonstration, and I've just given it the name Cup and Stapler, and you'll see why when we get into the actual footage. So I'm going to select that and click Choose, and now that's been chosen for my video previews, and I'll go down to my audio previews, and it stays selected there, so I'll just hit enter, and now I've got my video previews and audio previews saved to that folder on my external hard drive, which is the important part here. So all of the media and video and audio previews need to go onto the external drive. Now the next step is to browse for where I want to save my project. Now the project is the Premiere file itself, so I'm going to browse to the desktop, and I'm going to go create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Premiere Projects, and choose that from my location, and I'm going to give it the name Cup and Stapler, and click OK. Now this next section is just as important, but it's quite similar to what I've mentioned in with regard to the video formats and that kind of a thing. So this again is just asking you, what kind of camera did you use? What kind of footage have you shot? Now, I used a Canon 60D, and I had it set up for full HD. It's going to be progressive, and I can see that it's going to require that little P, and the 25 refers to 25 frames per second, which is the general video frame rate for cameras that you'll use over in Europe, as opposed to America or somewhere like that where they use 30. So because I know the camera and I know the settings, I know that this format is going to be perfectly good for my timeline. Now my timeline is going to need to be set up to receive all of these media clips so that I can edit them on the timeline. And when I'm talking about a timeline in Premiere, I'm also talking about what's called a sequence. So where you see sequence presets, it just means that when you're working on a timeline, do you want your timeline to match up with the footage that you've shot? And 99.9% of the time you are going to want your timeline and your sequence to match the footage that you've shot. So I click on that one to select it, and I give my sequence a name. Now a sequence, remember, is just a timeline, so I'm going to call it now this particular timeline is going to have some clips that were shot, just kind of test clips, just shot in the office, and I'm going to call it Office Edit. Click OK, and Premiere opens up. Now I'll just ignore that, and window, just pull up window, and We are in the interface. Apologies for the little jump there. I just need to reset the interface. And what we're looking at now is we're looking at a project which is ready to go. I've created a sequence, and that sequence is basically just showing me here my Office Edit sequence, but it is also representing this timeline here, and the timeline should be set up now to receive the media that I have shot, so I can start my edit. So that hopefully should give you a little bit of an insight into how you set up a Premiere project. It requires a certain amount of know-how of your camera, so it's very important that you know what kind of camera you've been using and what kind of footage you've been shooting.